The Kyshtym disaster is fraught with incompetence, mismanagement, dangerous working conditions, and lies. One such lie is the name itself. This event did not occur in Kyshtym. It would occur elsewhere, as you'll see. Now let's get started. After the development and use of nuclear weapons to end World War II, a race had begun between the United States and the Soviet Union to harness the great power that nuclear energy could bring to both. Thanks to the atomic spies, the Soviet Union was given a boost to the process, but still lagged behind and was racing to catch up with the United States. To solve this gap, the Soviet Union began building a research and development facility that included a nuclear fuel reprocessing plant and plutonium production site near the modern town of Azovsk, Russia. During its denied existence, it was known as Plutonium Facility Number 817, and workers lived in Chelyabinsk, about 55 miles away. The plant here was built between 1945 and 1948. Here's the thing about its construction, though. It was built quick. As this facility was built quickly and without complete knowledge of nuclear weapons development, many safety systems were either incorrectly implemented, insufficient, or non-existent, making them, quote, chronically unsafe for all parties near or involved. Regardless of this fact, this site would produce its first nuclear bomb in 1949. That did come at a price, of course. That price being, by the time all of this is said and done, there will be 17,245 workers who will have suffered radiation overdoses. That's a lot of people getting irradiated. Now that we've established just how unsafe this place was, where it was, and why, it's time to dive into the actual disaster. With the lack of safety, it should come as no surprise that when one of the cooling systems on a buried tank containing liquid reactor waste failed, it wasn't repaired. The failure of this cooling system lasted for about a year. Eventually, the fact that the waste was suffering from heat decay resulted in it getting to roughly 350 degrees Celsius. That's 662 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really hot. Hot enough to cause an explosion. The explosion would occur on the 29th of September 1957 and be equivalent to roughly 70 tons of TNT. This would blow the 1-meter thick concrete lid of the cooling tank into the air and spread radioactive fallout all over the area via a large plume. Most of this radioactive fallout consisted of cesium-137 and strontium-90. There were no direct casualties from the explosion, but there were consequences. As the radioactive fallout began to spread via the wind, it would ultimately cover an area of roughly 20,000 kilometers that had a population of 270,000, though only about 11,000 were evacuated over 2 years. Local lakes and rivers were contaminated as the radioactive fallout was carried by the wind to the northeast. In the ensuing months, many would be admitted to local hospitals with radiation sickness. Those not evacuated were ordered to begin cleaning up the debris, such as destroying contaminated crops and livestock. They would also work without protective gear. 1 year after this event, in 1958, there were reports of a nuclear incident, but nothing concrete. This event was covered up and not widely known about in the Western world. Many of the locals in the area were confused by the reports, with some even thinking that a global nuclear war had started. The real reports of the event would surface in 1976 by a Soviet biologist who reported on the incident in a British journal. The story would eventually be corroborated by another scientist. It is of note that the CIA knew about the event as early as 1960, but didn't reveal this information to the public. It obtained this information via U-2 spy planes and informants within the Soviet Union, though these stories would not be fully confirmed until the fall of the Soviet Union. All of this being said and done, the site is still considered contaminated, and still claims the lives of those nearby due to cancer. The Mayotte plant was shut down in 1987, but there are still people living in the contaminated areas, and they are still trying to be relocated out of the affected zone. The final overall effects of the disaster are still being studied and examined, as the secrecy surrounding the initial event have made it difficult to ascertain what is the cause of normal industrial pollution and what is the cause of radioactive fallout. Regardless, this would be a warm-up for the Soviets in regards to Chernobyl.